Okay, I think we'll get started. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us this evening in the second of our sort of graduate focused careers events as part of the Career Support Week. So we had one last week on mastering interviews as a graduate, and this week we're looking at how to ace assessment centres as a graduate. So just to introduce myself, my name is Tom Davis. I'm Graduate Employability Officer at the Careers Service at University of Leeds. And as that suggests, my job is sort of largely looking at graduates and also final years. And I will pass over to my colleague Sonia to introduce herself.
Hi, so I'm Sonia. I'm the graduate support intern. So I basically just assist Tom with everything graduate related.
And we'll stick with Sonia, who's just going to run you through the graduate outcomes survey briefly.
Yeah, so before we begin, just kind of wanted to highlight what the graduate outcomes survey is. So basically, around 15 months after you graduate, you'll get emailed from the email that you can see on the screen there, basically asking for you to fill out a survey that takes maybe 10 minutes, probably less, to fill out. And it basically asks you what you've been up to since graduation and sort of how your degree has helped you. So we're looking for your honest responses about how the university and your degree has helped you and how has it allowed you to get a job after graduation and just where you are in life at the moment, just so that the university can improve on the help that we give students for the future. So if you can fill that out whenever you get that in 15 months' time after graduation, that would be really helpful for future students at the University of Leeds.
Yeah, great. So just to run you through how today's session is going to work, we're going to start by sort of the real basics, really, looking at what is an assessment centre and what it might encompass and why employers might use it over other forms of recruitment. We'll then go into a little bit of how you might want to prepare for an assessment centre with some tips and experiences from other students and graduates who've gone through assessment centres in the past couple of years, including Sonia herself, who is a University of Leeds graduate. We'll then have a look at the sort of thing that you might experience as a group activity on the day of an assessment centre. We're not going to actually practice it today just because the mechanics of doing it online, to be honest, we haven't quite worked out how to do it, but we are keen to find out as part of this whether that would be a beneficial thing for you to do. For those of you in Leeds, we are running practice assessment centre activities in person in Leeds. Obviously, the advantage of doing this online for graduates is that you can join from wherever you are in the world. So we are going to ask you later on whether you'd like to sort of practice this in a more actual, sort of having a go at it way. This time we'll just do it in a bit more. We'll have a look at it and we'll have a bit of a chat. Well, I say a chat. We'll try and get you involved online. So do get ready to type away and contribute to the chat when we get to that stage. And then there'll be the opportunity to ask any questions of us at the end. Including, as I said, ask Sonia about her experiences of assessment centres. But to just kick things off, we'll just get you interacting a little bit and get those fingers working. So we wanted to find out from you what your experience is of assessment centres and why you've done that, why you've joined us today. So Sonia is putting three statements into the chat. So we've got A, I've done an assessment centre before. B, I've got an assessment centre coming up. Or C, I'm just trying to get ahead of the game and prepare. If you could like any of those statements that apply to you, so it can be more than one, and just to see sort of where you're up to in terms of your experience of assessment centres. So I will just give you 30 seconds or so, like all the posts that it applies to. Okay, so C looks like it's taken a very early lead. We've got B coming in not far behind. So a lot of people have either got one coming up or are trying to prepare in advance. A couple of people have done one before. So at the moment, we've got sort of two people who've done one before, four who've got one coming up, and seven just trying to prepare in advance. So I don't know what your knowledge is of assessment centres based on that. Hopefully you do know a little bit, but hopefully this will be useful for those of you who are trying to get ahead of the game and prepare in advance. This will be useful for those of you who've got one coming up. I'm sure it'll be even more useful. And perhaps for those of you who've done an assessment centre before, you'll be able to share in the chat some of your experiences and what you've found. So we'll come to that group stage in a little bit more. But for now, thanks for interacting with that. And I'll pass back over to Sonia, who's going to talk a little bit more through the basics of assessment centres. So over to you, Sonia.
Yeah, so first I'll just sort of briefly discuss what an assessment centre actually is for those of you that might not know. So an assessment centre usually comes up probably around stage 2 or 3 of a job application process. So you'll have applied for the job, maybe had a video interview or psychometric test, and then usually after that will be an assessment centre. So these can be half a day or a day usually, and either online or in person. Um, and usually tasks will include a group task with your peers. There will be maybe a presentation or an interview, and those are the two sort of main areas that you'll have in most assessment centres, and then other assessment centres will have different little additions depending on who you're applying for. And assessment centres really are an opportunity for, I suppose, the recruiters to see like the real you, basically see your personality shine through, to see if your values align with their values, and how you work with other people. I also want to say that it's also an opportunity for you to see whether you're a good fit for the company, because it is a two-way streak, and you might attend an assessment centre and decide that that kind of company isn't for you. So it's a good learning curve for both of you. So yeah, so you'll have group tasks and then maybe presentations, which you'll prepare for before, and any interviews. There's the main three. And yeah, and it's also a networking opportunity. So you get to meet people from the company, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, you can meet people that are also going through similar jobs to you. So it's also a good way to connect with people who are working in the industry that you want. Going to the next slide. So this is just a bit about preparation, really. So these quotes on here are just some top tips we have from other people who have done assessment centres in the past, as preparation is really key. So firstly, a lot of them will give you a presentation to prepare beforehand. So making sure that you have a good PowerPoint for that, you know exactly what you're going to say, um, you've made it look nice, you've just sort of rehearsed it so you know exactly what you're going to do with the presentation. And also the same goes for the interview, as there is usually an interview element to an assessment centre. So, and in the same way that you'd prepare for an interview, if it was just like a normal interview, like you and a panel, the same way you do for an assessment centre. I think a lot of people struggle the most with the group activity because it's quite hard to prepare for a group activity. I'd say for this one, it's really good to look at past ones and see maybe what sort of tasks have come up in the past. For example, for myself, I've done quite a few assessment centres with different companies, such as law firms, charities, even engineering companies. What have I had? So I've had one group task, which was one of them, what would you take on a desert island? Um, and that was online, so that was very much discussion based with breakout rooms where we sort of discussed what we would take and why. I've had one engineering one was we had to build something, so we had to build a tower in a set amount of time with, I think we had like scissors, paper, straws, that sort of thing. So that was a lot more practical. Then I've had others where they give you a budget and they give you like a business and you sort of have to develop a business model, almost a bit like you're on The Apprentice. So they can be very different depending on the industry that you are trying to go into. I would say the biggest piece of advice for those group tasks are definitely, it's not always about being right or wrong. It's definitely about collaborating with the people that you're kind of doing the task with. So in terms of preparation, research the company, understand their values so that you can demonstrate those values within the day of within the assessment day. And then make sure you are as prepared for your interview and presentation as you can be. And we'll go into a little bit more about that in the next few slides. If you wouldn't mind going on the next slide, Tom. Yeah, so a bit more on preparation. So as I was saying, in terms of group activity, play to your strengths. So in the group activities, I appreciate it's a very fine line between, you want to show leadership skills, you want to show that, you can take control of a group of people, but it's also about showing that you can collaborate well and work well with people. And I think it's a very fine balance between wanting to show your leadership, but also wanting to show your collaboration skills. And this is where I'm referring back to what I said before in terms of it's not always about winning or coming first if it's a competition between the teams or being right or wrong. It's about working well with the people that you're with, because ultimately in the assessment centre, they're looking for people that will work well within their company and work well with the people that are already working there. So so play to your strengths, and this leads on to actively listen. Listen to the people that you're with. Don't try and take control of the whole task. Show that you're actively listening. So active listening comes from body language, facial expressions, especially I know with virtual ones is more difficult, which is why it's even more important to try and make that eye contact, nod, agree, smile, show that you're engaging, like maybe like refer back to what someone else has said to show that you've actively listened to that person. Use their names, because in a group task, it's quite nice if you can start using their names because it shows that you've paid attention to that person. And then, yes, the STAR method for individual interviews, which we'll go on to on the next slide. I hope, yes. So the STAR method is what you would use to answer the interview style questions, which you would get in your presentations if you have to do a presentation, or just in the interview style questions that you will get during your assessment centre at some point, whether that's in a group or individual. I'm sure you've all heard about the STAR method, but if not, I'll just kind of briefly explain what each one is. So you would answer a competency-based question using the STAR method. So that would be, for example, a question that would go, give us a time where you showed excellent communication skills, or describe a time to us when you problem solved to achieve a common goal. Something like that, just as an example. So you would briefly outline the situation and task. So those first two S and T, those are the ones that you'll probably spend the least amount of time talking about. So situation, just briefly explain the situation, just in short words. You can simplify it. It doesn't have to be as complicated as maybe the situation actually was, just simplify it. And then same with the tasks, just a little bit about what the actual task was. And then you really want to go into more detail with action and result. So action is your chance to explain what you did. Even if they're asking about collaboration or a group activity that you did, they want to know what you specifically did to help the desired outcome or whatever the story is trying to ask you about. So action and result. So try and quantify it. How well did you do? Did you run a successful event where 100 people showed up? Or were you given really good reviews after? And if it didn't go that well, it's time to reflect, because reflection is just as important as something going well, is being able to reflect on things that didn't go as well and be able to do better next time. So that's sort of the brief outline of how you would answer a competency-based question. So it's really good if you can try and stick to that a little bit, just so then you know that you've covered everything that they're looking for. As employers really do look for the STAR method, and employers know what the STAR method is. I know it's been brought to my attention by employers before that they do like the STAR method structure, as it makes it quite easy for them to understand your answer. So I don't know if you've just seen, but Tom has also put in the chat a link to the interview session that we ran last week, which has a lot more tops and tips on interviews and the STAR method and everything to do with that. Okay, cool. Do you want to go on to the next slide? Cool. And then probably finally for me is a little bit about virtual assessment centres versus in-person assessment centres, because they can be quite different. So I would say probably a majority would nowadays be in person, where you go into their office for either half a day or a day, and it's a good chance to network. So you go in, so with the in-person assessment centres, it's definitely more emphasis on showing up on time, dress smart casual. It can be quite nerve-wracking because you're going into a whole new environment, meeting lots of new people who are, you're competing for a same job. So with in-person assessment centres, I think it's definitely about calming your nerves and making sure you know exactly where you're going, making sure you know exactly what the agenda for the day is, so that you're not sort of taken aback by anything, and just really try and calm your nerves. With an assessment centre in person, it's also good to remember that whether you're in a presentation or not, or whether you're delivering a task or not, that you're being assessed sort of 24/7. So any little conversations you're having with people, it's good to really try and get talking to other people, get talking to the assessors, really try and make a good impression of yourself, and really try and get stuck in, get involved, and just show your personality, be nice, be friendly. yeah, and just remember that a whole day, that's kind of the point of an assessment centre, where they're assessing you to see if you're a good fit for their company and whether you would mesh well with others. And then for an virtual assessment centre, I think it's almost the opposite, where like you're quite comfortable probably doing it from your own home. Remember that you are also being assessed. And I know it can be a bit more difficult to make that small talk and almost make yourself noticed, because you're just one little icon in a bunch of icons on a screen. But it's really important to have the eye contact, use their names. Their names are written on there, so you can really direct questions at people. Don't be shy to make a bit of small talk in a I don't know, a gap of silence, because they really do notice these things, and it's a really good way to make sure that you are remembered during the assessment centre day. Because I know that when it's online, you might feel a little bit overlooked, and you don't feel like your personality is shone through as much as you know that it can. So I think those little things, making eye contact, using their names, and just trying to fill in those any bits of silence, are a really good way to just sort of make sure that you can show who you are. Yeah. Okay, that's everything from me.
Great, thanks a lot, Sonia. Again, and just to echo all of what Sonia said there about sort of preparing for virtual or in person, it's in every aspect of work now, including assessment centres. We've prepared for this, and we're delivering this in a very different way to how we would if we were doing it in person. So just taking that forward into how you would prepare for your assessment centre, and thinking about that and being really conscious of that, and almost giving a bit more if you're delivering it online, because naturally our personalities don't come out just quite as much. So we're going to move on now to sort of what might be a kind of example assessment centre group activity. So this is one, it's completely made up. It's not real ones. It's one that my colleague has written. And it's about a hypothetical made up company called Leeds Helicopters and an expansion into the Asian market. I'm not going to read the whole thing out. So what I'm going to do is I'll give sort of a summary, and I'll allow you all to read it properly. But it's essentially about a made-up company that are looking to expand into the Asian market, and they're considering opening a manufacturing plant in the Philippines. You've been asked to deliver a 2-minute presentation at the end of that about the feasibility of this. That's normally how these group tasks work, where you'll have a task, you'll discuss it, you'll agree, you'll disagree, you'll decide what route to go down, and then you'll feed back to the group at the end. So you'll generally have sort of 20, 25 minutes to discuss, and then as part of that, you'll have to come up with a 2-minute presentation. So I'll just allow you to read that properly. And then I'll move on to some of the questions that would be considered as part of this activity. So there's a few different questions there relating to commercial awareness. This would normally be the stage where you get into the groups and discuss these and then feedback. We're not going to do that in this one, but I'll allow you to read these questions, and then we'll do a sort of discussion, a bit of a discussion in the chat, and we'll go through how some of these things might make you feel and what you thought of the questions and how that would make you feel as part of the task afterwards. So again, I'll just give you a minute or two to read these properly. Just flip back to the previous slide as well. And then back to the questions. I'll give 30 seconds or so on this. So think about how you might go about answering this if you were to be given this. Okay, so it's time for you to get involved now. So in the chat, I want you to type up some reflections on sort of, considering if you were given that task and if you were sort of asked to deliver that, a couple of prompts there. How would you find that task? What were your first thoughts when you saw it? What did you think? What do you think you'd enjoy about doing that task? Like what would you find interesting? What would you find good about being in a group? On the flip side, what would you find challenging? Like what are your first thoughts on things you might struggle with if you were given that in a sort of pressure environment with an assessment centre? So hopefully we'll get some comments in the chat now. Get your comments in. I mean, sort of, I guess while we're waiting for people to sort of type their comments in, Sonia, have you got any thoughts on kind of what you thought about that? You would think if you were given that?
Yes, I mean, I would say it's definitely quite challenging in terms of, like you might not know that much about the Asian market, depending on the research that you might have happened to have done or not. Um, but I think it's definitely eye-opening in terms of like commercial awareness comes from knowing things in like the news that's going on. So I always think it's worth, familiarizing yourself with sort of what's going on in the world before an assessment center, especially if it's like a business one or anyone that requires quite a lot of like commercial awareness. So I think that's one definite tip that you can take from questions that ask you like things about like in the world. I mean, in the Philippines, I wouldn't really know who to go to in the Philippines. I don't know if anyone else has opinions on that, but it's definitely one that really makes you reflect on, having a bit of a global knowledge. So I think going on the news, reading even just like the headlines and stuff, I think that's quite a useful thing to do so that you're not as stuck in these sort of situations.
Yeah, I'd echo all of that. I think a little bit of prep, with the caveat of what we talked about before, where the group the group activity is the hardest thing to prepare for. It is sort of the unknown, but you can definitely do a little bit of prep and sort of think about you know what sort of things they might ask you, and just do a little bit of commercial awareness, a little bit of um, research around the company and that sort of thing, just little tidbits that you can drop in. But yeah, I think we've got quite a shy group with us today. Oh, we have got one comment from Laura here. I think I would find this challenging. Not having knowledge about the market would make me feel on the ag food bit, but I think I would still enjoy the challenge. And then Hatu, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. The task requires so much creativity in approaching each individual question. Yeah, absolutely. It really does. But an opportunity to articulate answers you'd enjoy and the things you'd find challenging, time pressure, and some questions could be outside of someone's background knowledge. So I think those are both really good comments, and thank you for those. We've also got a comment from Mohammed here. He says, task would be a great opportunity to collaborate with the team. It'd be fun because I wouldn't be alone as with interviews, rather as a group. I think that's a really good point, Mohammed. I think that's something really important to remember, like to almost see this as a opportunity to get involved and get chatting and actually work on something where you're not being judged so much on your experience or your background. If you're asked, for example, about a time where, I don't know, what's a typical interview question? You've had to lead a project, then I'm sure you all have got experience of leading a project, but you will be judged kind of on how well you've delivered a project and how well you can articulate this. Whereas this is something where, to an extent, everyone comes into this equal. You're not supposed to know anything before. So I think it's really important to, although this is nerve-wracking and challenging, which both Laura and Hatu have acknowledged, it is something that you can enjoy as well and sort of getting that creative license. But yeah, so I think it's good that we've all recognised that there is a bit of creativity and stuff to enjoy there as well. So a couple of things that I sort of thought were key to sort of reflect on and remember when you're going to these group challenges is that, of course, it's meant to be challenging. I've had a few years experience now of work, and if I was given that task, I would have absolutely no idea how to approach it. It's kind of meant to be a lot of information, probably meant to be so much information that arguably it's difficult to get through in the time allocated, and that's absolutely fine. Remember, as Sonia said, it's sort of less about getting right or wrong answers per se, or completing the task, because there is no right or wrong answers. It isn't something you're going to know. Obviously, if that was a real situation where a real company were thinking about doing that, you could have 150 sort of well-paid consultants with years of experience looking at that for a number of years before they come up with an answer. So try not to think about it in terms of whether it's a right or wrong answer, and just go into it with the attitude of like, okay, how would I go into this if I was, hypothetically just in the context of this group exercise. So think about that. It's more about how you come up with the process. I don't know if any of you remember when you used to do sort of maths exams and you'd have sort of 5 points for an answer, and 4 points of that would be for your workings, and 1 point would be for actually getting the correct answer. That's kind of how it works with assessment centres, really. It's less about the correct answer and more about how you get there. Working together, Sonia gave some really good tips earlier on how you work with people and sort of ways to get other people involved, but making sure that you're striking a balance between coming up with ideas but not over dominating the group or talking over others. Challenge and debate. It's important to give your opinion and not sort of just agree with everyone or just say, yeah, yeah, because that makes it look like you haven't got a strong voice, but also make sure that you're not dominating the group or talking over everyone or sort of being too aggressive or disrespectful in your disagreements. So challenge, but challenge respectively would be what I'd say. And I think making sure you understand the task is really important. So if we go back and look at some of the questions, what would you ask them? So it's not just who can you speak to in the Philippines, it's also what would you ask them. So it's sort of both parts are as important as the other bit. From a commercial and just logistical perspective, why is it beneficial to have a base in Asia? Well, if we go back and look, it's to maximize efficiency. So make sure that you've read the whole task. Make sure you're looking at any details. I think if it's an in-person, I have gone too far now. If it's an in-person thing, use pens provided, take one with you, make sure it's circling relevant information and sort of, make sure you're highlighting the obvious things. There might also be, sometimes I'll try and throw in a few red herrings, a few tricks to throw you off a little bit. Be aware of those, challenge those, think about those, and make sure you've really understood the task before you get going. It's kind of similar to advice you'd have for exams at all levels. Make sure you've read the question at least a few times before you sort of blaze in and try to start answering, because that's where you'll get stuff wrong. And for all that there's no right or wrong answers, wrong if you've just not understood the task at all, that probably is sort of seen as a wrong answer, unsurprisingly. And yeah, as we talked about before, try to relax and even enjoy it, lean into it, embrace it. The time will go by so quickly that you'll barely realize you've got going beforehand. On that note, make sure you are keeping time. If no one in your group has already done it, allocate yourself as the timekeeper. That's a really good thing that employers like to see and assessors like to see. But just try to enjoy it and relax, and it'll be, it's probably going to go quicker and be less daunting and more fun than the interview part. And then Mohammed's also put in there about a challenging aspect would be you're relying on your own knowledge unless they permit us to research online. So they will almost never ask you to research online. Generally, it will be information. It will just be the kind of information that's provided in the activity. They may they may want you to bring in some prior knowledge. Often they won't. So try not to overthink that aspect. It may be they're just asking you to go off sort of made up information, which for the purpose of the task is real. I think generally speaking, sort of try and understand, and you can always ask your assessors what they're looking for in terms of, is it just the information in here or do you want us to bring in our wider knowledge? But yeah, generally speaking, you won't need to use any of the time up to research online because it's more about the discussion and your conclusions and then how you allocate your tasks in order to present effectively. So yeah, as well as your group tasks, there will be a presentation element to that. So generally how it will work is you'll have that chunk of time is for you to discuss, to come up with your suggestions, and then also to allocate your presentations. So they generally ask, well, they will always ask that every member of the team presents, so there's no getting out of that. And if you are trying to get out of that, spoiler alert, you're going to score really poorly. So you are going to have to present. When you do present, remember to be confident. Remember to look at the room, whether that's a virtual or in-person room. Just try to be confident in the conclusions you've drawn and talk articulately. If you're not good at presenting or you're not confident in presenting, try to remember that probably everyone is nervous in there as well, and that the assessors aren't trying to catch you out. It's also your chance to shine. If you can deliver a really succinct, confident, well thought out element of the presentation, that may put you ahead of people who aren't so much. That's also the case when it comes to your individual interview as well. It's the chance to show a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about your experiences and why you'd be a good fit. I think this is where it could be relevant as well that we're talking to a group of graduates. You have you've already graduated, you've seen yourself through university, whether that's undergrad or postgraduate. You've possibly had a bit of experience post university or outside of university, and you've maybe thought sort of more about how this is the right opportunity for you, and that you're ready to you're really ready to start. So I think bear in mind that I think sometimes graduates have a bit of confidence issue in that they think that, I'm up against students. I'm going to look like why haven't I already got sorted? There might be lots of reasons that you're going into these things as a graduate. So try and be confident. And remember that this is time to really tell us as in employers about yourself and, really, really sort of nail who you are and why you'd be a good fit for the company. And as Sonia said, think about how it's also your chance for you to find out about them and whether they'd be a good fit for you, because that's just as important. There will also be often a psychometric test component in the assessment centre. So the standard sort of layout for a assessment centre, and it will vary depending on employer and size and that sort of thing. And they will generally send you the instructions before. So make sure that you've understood and that you know what you're preparing for, because there's no point preparing for something that won't take place. Or on the flip side, it's going to put you at a disadvantage if you haven't prepared for or thought through something that they do ask about. If in the unlikely event they don't tell you what they are expecting from you on the day, if you do a bit of online research about what they've asked in the past, particularly for any sort of big or even big-ish graduate employer, there'll be information available on sites like Glassdoor and Assessment Day, or just forums and that sort of thing. So make sure that you have understood what they are going to ask of you, but generally it will be sort of some form of group exercise, some form of individual interview, and often some psychometric tests. I'm sure the majority of you know what psychometric tests are, so I won't go into them in too much detail, but there's different types such as verbal, numerical, deductive and logical tests, and sometimes spatial ones for more engineering-y type roles. So familiarize yourself with what they are. And the really important thing to remember with them is that practice makes perfect, or if it doesn't make perfect, then it definitely makes significantly stronger than you were before. It's really, they can be quite daunting, and again, they can be quite challenging. I know sort of the first time that you look at sort of psychometric tests when you're not familiar with them and you look at them, you think, oh, geez, there's absolutely no way I'll be able to answer this. This is way outside my comfort zone. But you really do notice that sort of once you've got familiar with them and you've sort of started to spot the pattern of how they work and that sort of thing, they do become, I don't want to say easy, I was about to say easy, I'm not going to say easy, but they do become significantly less daunting. You are all graduates of a very good university. You all clearly have intelligence. These shouldn't be beyond you. It's just about familiarizing yourself and practicing. For example, numerical reasoning tests. Generally, the sort of level those are pitched at is sort of moderately difficult GCSE, which for those of you who are joining us internationally, GCSE is sort of the 16-year-old exams. And so it's just about getting familiar with them and getting confident, and maybe even just brushing up on your basic sort of numerical skills or verbal skills if you feel like you need that. We have access to a platform called Graduates First, where you can practice psychometric tests. As a graduate, you don't get automatic access to it, but we can set you up. So you just need to email. I've put graduate support at leeds.ac.uk there. It's actually careers.reception@leeds.ac.uk that you want to email if you want to get that set up. But if you do email that address, then we can get through to the right people to get you set up as well. So just practice, make sure that you're confident. The more you can do, the more confident you will get, and before you know it, you'll be whizzing through them. On that note, on the subject of timing, in the same way that I said about the group tasks, that sometimes it's very difficult to get through it all in time, it is worth pointing out as well with psychometric tests that sometimes they will deliberately give you not enough time to get through all the questions, or certainly to get through all the questions by thinking about them properly. don't be, the temptation is to kind of try and rush and to skip through some and take some guesses so that you can get through them all. Try to resist that temptation. I know it's sort of human nature that it's frustrating if you've got limited time left and you're on 80% and you're like, oh, maybe if I just rush through these, I can get to 100%. It's really worth just taking your time and getting a better score, a better percentage score of the questions that you have answered rather than trying to rush through and sort of, all right, maybe getting closer to 100% through or, yeah, a bit closer, but having a lower correct answer threshold. So that is just something to bear in mind with that. If you do want to talk about psychometric tests in more detail with anyone, we've got appointments available where you can talk about that. And that brings me on to sort of our final slide before we go into Q&A, where we can just a reminder of what we offer as a careers service when it comes to assessment centre support. So as I mentioned at the start, we've got mock assessment centres taking place through the rest of semester one, which takes us up to Christmas and into the new year as well. These are brand new for this academic year. We've never done them before. I took part in one on Tuesday as one of the assessors. Was a small group of I think it's 10 to 15 students maximum. So it's really quite a small group. It's just a practice, it's a chance to practice those group exercise tasks like that lead helicopter one, sort of pretend tasks that you might get, the sort of thing. And then we give you a bit of feedback at the end as you would get in a real assessment centre. So those are every Tuesday in term time from November through to March, and you're very welcome to join as a graduate if you can get to Leeds. Those are bookable through My Career events calendar. If you're not already signed up on My Career as a graduate, please do sign up. So it's mycareer.leeds.ac.uk, and you can do graduate registration there, and Adam, Sonia, or me will be able to approve you. And then you'll be able to get through to all our events, appointments, vacancies, resources as you could as a student, and also receive our fortnightly graduate newsletter. I think the majority of you probably are already on that, but you may have received this email invite through the advancement and alumni team's email addresses, so it's possible that you haven't registered yet. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. In terms of how we can help you, we have application support and mock interview appointments. So application support, as the name suggests, is a chance for you to get feedback on your applications and CVs for any jobs, and also to discuss in sort of brief detail any tasks as part of the assessment centre. You might be curious about getting sort of a bit of feedback from a careers professional about what they might ask and tips and that sort of thing, similar to what we've done here, but maybe a bit more specific. And mock interviews, again, as the name suggests, it's a chance for you to get sort of a bit of interview practice with an advisor before the big day. So you can either submit the questions if you've got them, or you can submit details of the job if you haven't, and the advisor will do sort of a good educated guess about the sort of thing you might be asked. And they'll ask you some questions, give you the chance to answer them as you would in an interview, and then give you a bit of feedback about how to prepare. If you haven't booked a mock interview, I'd really recommend as well just practicing yourself, thinking about the sort of things they might ask you, practicing saying it out loud, you know, getting comfortable with the sound of your own voice, which I know is really difficult. And I can say that having been speaking for the last 20 minutes, so that isn't easy. But yeah, just getting confident, talking about yourself, talking in the style of interview, practicing that STAR method that Sonia was talking about earlier, and getting familiar with that. I saw there was a question in the Q&A, excuse me, which we'll come to in a minute, about clothing for interviews. But we've also got another new initiative called the Interview Wardrobe, which is, again, only really applicable for those of you still based in Leeds or nearby. But that is a scheme where we lend out interview appropriate clothes that have been donated from various sources for people who may not have anything appropriate to wear for an interview or anything that they feel like is appropriate. So yeah, that's open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. In term time, so another month or so up to Christmas, and then we restart again in late January. But yeah, if you are worried at all about what you've got and whether it's interview appropriate, come along and we'll be happy to try and get you sorted. And then just finally, online resources you can engage with. So My Career, I've already mentioned. Target Jobs and Prospects are both great general careers information sites for students and graduates, where you can get advice and feedback, not feedback, sorry, but advice and prep work on interviews, applications, assessment centres, as well as just general careers advice. Graduates First, as I've already mentioned, is our psychometric testing site. Practice interviewer is another way of getting familiar with practice interviewer is another way of sort of practicing your interview, as the name suggests. It's an online video bit of software where you can put in questions and then practice saying them into camera and watching yourself back, which I can confirm is an absolutely horrible thing to do, but it's really, really useful. You get to spot sort of, you can be your own best judge on how you can improve upon what you're saying, how you can articulate it differently, things you do that you don't like, things you do that you do like. So it's a really good way of practicing before the interview. And then CV Checker as well is a piece of automated software we have where you can feed your CV through and get immediate feedback on sort of things to improve. You get a score, things that are good, things that can be improved upon. For CV Checker, you just need to go on. We will either pop the link in the chat or we'll send it through afterwards, but you go on CV Checker and there's alumni sign up and the code is Leeds Grad. Practice interviewer, you access through the resources tab on My Career and Graduates First. Natalie dropped the email address in there. It's careers.reception@leeds.ac.uk. If you can't find any of these or you've got any questions afterwards, just graduate support@leeds.ac.uk. So that is the end of sort of our slides. We're going to move on to the Q&A in a moment. I'd also just really like to encourage you to complete the feedback form if you can. It really, really helps us. It's the first time we've run these events specifically for graduates. So it'd be great if we can get your feedback on sort of what was good, what was bad, what you would like to see more of. Would you like to see more of these sort of things? Natalie is also going to drop a poll into the chat shortly about whether or not you would like to see sort of whether you would like us to run a virtual mock assessment centre. So I've talked about the in-person mock assessment centres we're doing. One of the things we were considering doing with this was running sort of a group exercise online and whether or not that would be something you'd like to see. We thought for now we keep it simple and just do an information session, but it'd be something that we can run and we can set up. So Natalie is going to drop a comment in a moment saying, would you be interested? There we go. Would you be interested in a virtual mock assessment centre? Like this post to register your interest. That's not a promise that we're going to do it, but it means that if a good number of you are up for it, we'll try and look at running it at some point in the nearish future, just so that for those of you who aren't in Leeds, we can get you involved. So if you did want that to run, we would need you to actively engage and talk to people and be an active presence. But yeah, we will we'll reflect on how many of you are liking that. So I can see 4 people have liked that already. We probably need a few more of you to say yes if you want us to run it, but I'll leave it there for now and we'll move over to questions. So I think the first question came from Laura and it's about commercial awareness and how to develop a better commercial knowledge. She doesn't feel reading and exploring the news is giving me enough knowledge. Sonia, I'm going to pop that to you first while I have a sip of water and give my voice a break. I have a few thoughts, but do you have anything to suggest to Laura?
So I'm gonna probably first say like you're never gonna know everything. And a lot of time in the assessment centers, you obviously don't know what they're gonna ask. So you're never gonna be like 100% prepared for anything that might come up. But I think obviously the news is a good starting point. And then I think it really depends what industry you're hoping to go into. But for example, I know on a lot of companies' websites, they'll have their own sort of news and things that they're interested in. So, for example, different sustainability initiatives, and they'll have like different like it's like usually called like recent news or updates, or like they might have their own blog on like a company's website. And I think that's a good starting point to see the type of things and type of countries they deal with, or if it's like engineering type of like aviation or cars or like different AI or technology advancements that they're particularly interested in. So I think going on the company's website, having a look at their recent news and their updates will give you an idea of maybe the things you could read up more on. Same goes for their social medias and LinkedIn's, just seeing the type of people that they follow and type of things that they're interested in terms of countries, maybe seeing the countries that maybe they have locations in, different factories or bases. I think those could all be good starting points for maybe being a little bit more prepared for any kind of questions that come up around commercial knowledge.
Yeah, really good suggestions there. Companies' websites was, yeah, one of the things that I was going to suggest as well. I think also another thing that I'd add, which is kind of along the same lines, is sort of sector-specific websites relating to the company that you're applying to. So not just the company itself, but also pretty much any sector will have websites and sort of publications relating to the sector. So if we use like advertising and marketing, for example, but you can apply this to any sector, um, there will be loads and loads of industry websites where they're talking about sort of hot topics in the industry at the moment, things that are coming up, controversies, that sort of thing. So having a look at those as well, and that can be, to be honest, as well, a little bit more interesting and a way of developing a bit more commercial awareness. And also, I'd just say as well, don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you're getting enough knowledge. You're never going to be expected at this stage, or to be honest, any stage, to know absolutely everything in terms of commercial awareness. It's just a sort of making sure that you've got a basic understanding and enough to sort of try and be able to answer any questions that you are asked or demonstrate you've got a bit of knowledge. Any little bits and pieces you can drop into your answers or drop in a group assessment or things like that are going to help. So don't beat yourself up or feel like you need to sort of go into this with the knowledge of every single thing under the sun relating to the company or sector. Like, a bit known well is probably better than sort of knowing absolutely tons and tons poorly. So yeah, try not to put too much pressure on yourself, but those might be some good additional things to look at in terms of just the standard news as well. So hopefully that's answered your question, Laura. So we've got another question here about would it be overkill to wear a formal suit for an assessment centre if it consists of an interview, presentation, and assessment? Again, I'll start with you, Sonia, if that's all right, and we'll come back to me. I can't hear you for some reason. I'm afraid I don't seem to be able to hear you. I don't know if Natalie can at all. Um, okay, I will. I'll. No, we could hear you crystal clear before, and now we've completely lost you now. I don't know what's happened. Well, I'll tell you what. I will. I'll start then. While Sonia, we try to sort out some of those tech issues. I think generally, there is no such thing as dressing too smartly. There is such a thing as dressing not smartly enough. Um, I think, as a general rule, it's kind of what makes you feel comfortable. It certainly won't be overkill to wear a formal suit. Um, the one thing I'd say slightly is that um, it may make you feel uncomfortable. So, if you're not used to wearing a suit, it can make you feel quite rigid and sort of like you're not relaxed or you're not yourself, which might have a detrimental effect on you. Um, but on the other hand, I think it is far more likely that you would be sort of viewed unfavorably or viewed sort of negatively for not being dressed smartly enough than for being too smart. I don't think really too smart really exists, unless it's a very relaxed company, of course. But I think as a general rule, if you're not sure, dress smarter than you think you might need to. If but for the majority of things now, I think something smart casual is probably fine. And by smart casual, we're sort of talking like, you know, a smart shirt, smart trousers, shoes rather than trainers, and that would probably do the job. But to an extent, it's whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I think a note on virtual ones as well. It's worth considering what you want to wear for that as well, because admittedly, you don't need you're not being seen in the same way, but you still want to wear something that's smart. We get people sometimes turning up to things, which is kind of fine because it's not formal things, but you know, wearing hoodies with hoods up or football t-shirts or that sort of thing, just because it's as Sonia said, just because it's virtual doesn't mean you're not being assessed. So yeah, I would say if you are doing a virtual one as well, a formal suit might be overkill, but something that makes you feel professional and sort of helps you do as well as you can will be the best possible thing. I believe from comments going on in the background, we've still not been able to hear Sonia, but she is going to type additional things to what I'm saying, I think, which is great. It does mean that no, we still can't hear you, I'm afraid. Oh, there we go. You came back. You're back.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, if you can't hear me at any point, I'm just going to type a little comment to your questions. Sure. But I'll talk quickly before it goes away. I was just going to add, it's always been smart casual, like that's typically what they say, but obviously smart casual is quite vague. I've attended quite a few assessment centres where it's been very normal for people to wear suits. As it is a professional day, I'd say obviously it's a little bit more casual if you're on a virtual interview or assessment centre. But yeah, I don't think you should feel apprehensive about wearing a suit. But equally, like Tom said, it's about feeling comfortable. If you're going to feel uncomfortable in a suit, don't wear one because you want to feel confident in what you're wearing and throughout the whole day. And what you wear does affect your confidence. So you're also more than welcome to just wear a pair of trousers and a shirt. That's perfectly acceptable. Or if you want to wear a suit, then that is also perfectly acceptable. And then yeah, some shoes. Maybe don't wear some like trainers. I think that's like the level I would say. But yeah, don't feel shy about wearing a suit if you want to wear one. It would not be overkill.
I'm on mute there. My mic hasn't broken, I think. I think that's just me screwing up. So next question there is from Mohammed. So he asks, what technical skills are being tested in the tests for engineering graduates? And will they give us the preparatory materials beforehand? Technical skills, it's not my area of expertise, to be perfectly honest with you, Mohammed, but we there will be slightly different tests, and there might be technical skills. It will vary employer to employer. What I would advise doing, we have faculty teams as well, so getting in touch with them, doing a bit of research online as well when you come to being invited to one of these. In terms of will they give the material beforehand, again, it just massively depends on the company, to be honest. More and more companies now are sort of being open about what they'll be asking you and giving you materials beforehand. However, not everyone does. And sometimes, as I said, if we go back to that group exercise stuff, they're deliberately not giving it you beforehand because they want to see how you react on the sort of day. So I think the important thing to do really, just generally, so you asked specifically with engineering, but to sort of bring it out to everyone, is make sure you read and reread and reread the emails that you sent beforehand and make sure you really understand. And then, yeah, once you've got invites or once you know you're going to one, get in touch with us, book appointments with advisors, and do online research to see what they've asked in the past, and do as much prep as you can. So I hope that answers that one for you, Mohammed. And then I think we've just got one more question from Isra, which is any advice regarding the written exercises that are often part of assessment centres. For example, sometimes you're asked to write an email based on given information and that sort of thing. Sonia, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on that. I do, but for the sake of giving you some time as well to talk, so it's not just me, I'll ask you first.
I'm just going to check you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yes, okay. So any advice around the written exercises that are part of this writing for the emails? Yeah, so I think in terms of writing it up, once again, I think it's really important to understand exactly what they want you to do. I know with assessment centres, it's quite a lot of adrenaline. But just take a step back and reread exactly what they want you to do a few times just so that you haven't misunderstood it. Because you always are tempted to jump right in, especially when there's a time limit. But actually take a few moments to understand exactly what they're asking you to do. In terms of like, for example, as you've given here, writing an email based off information they've given you. And there's some basic things you can do very easily. Just make sure you've addressed the email, make it professional, make sure you're using the right type of language as employers look for, skills in written communication as well as verbal communication. So just make sure it's written nicely, formally, pleasantly. Make sure you've got all of that in as like a basic rule for like any industry with any email kind of related task. And then I suppose it really depends on the type of task they've asked you to do, but condensing the knowledge that you've been given. And yeah, I think it really depends on what task you're given. But in any written exercise, I think it really is most important you can say is the way you write. So making it formal, making it professional, making sure you're addressing it correctly, ending the email or any other like letter that they might want you to write correctly, with the right sort of, dear, and then whoever they want you to, and then best wishes, kind regards at the end. So just making it nice, formal, and professional. That's sort of what I can give at the moment because I'm not sure exactly in what email it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. I think sometimes it will be that sort of thing. Sometimes it'll be something a bit different, but generally some sort of written exercise related to an activity that you'd typically be expected to undertake in the role. So sometimes you might be asked to produce a report based on some information, or if it's a more data heavy sort of role, you might be asked to do some sort of data task and write a summary of it or something like that. So these sort of things. I think the important thing to remember, there's two important things. I completely echo what Sonia said about understand, do it to the best of your ability. Try again. I'm going to repeat what we said in the group task and the sort of interviews. Try and relax a little bit. It's something that they're not trying to catch you out, probably. They're just trying to see how you perform under a bit of time pressure and just to make sure that you don't completely lose your head. So it should be something that you're capable of doing. So try and relax in that respect. I'll also say that, and I guess this is a bit of a sort of inside track, it's probably not the most important bit of the assessment centre. And if you do go to an interview where you have a written task as well, which sometimes, you'll get that as well, like not a formal assessment centre, but you might get an interview and a task. It's rarely the bit that they judge the most. It's often a sort of more of a check to make sure that you actually are sort of as good as you appear at an interview, just to sort of make sure that they're not, I guess, being taken in by someone who talks a great game and then it turns out isn't actually great at task. So it's more of a sort of check rather than sort of the thing that they'll be deciding whether or not to give you the job on. So yeah, relax, take your time, understand the task, and sort of do the best you can, and be aware of the time as well. So I think we're on 28 minutes past, so we've nearly hit our hour, and I can't see any more questions. And there's been a few questions around practicing tests and booking things, which I think Natalie's answered. But yeah, if there is anything else that you're not sure about or you didn't feel was answered, do feel free to drop us an email. If you haven't already filled in that feedback form or liked the comment around a virtual assessment centre exercise, if you would like to be involved in that, then please do. The recording will be, I believe, emailed to you in the next couple of days. But I think all that sort of really remains for us to say is thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.